and welcome to the Garden Railway. And with our track down and our ballast in place, at least it's beginning to look like a real railway. But unfortunately, unless I go woo, it doesn't sound like a real railway. And that's because we're missing one vital ingredient. Motive power. What does it mean to you? To me, rather bizarrely, it means standing at Wimbledon Station as a Class 50 diesel comes hurtling towards me. It's at full throttle, going at top speed, and as it goes past, the sound of it is quite orgasmic. For some people, it's steam, or indeed electric. But when it comes to your garden railway, what motive power should you choose? As usual, I haven't got a clue. But today we're at the garden of Brian McCombie, and Lionel Pike is joining us once again. Well, I know I said I didn't know about motive power there, but that was a bit of dramatic effect actually, Lionel. I do know a bit, and I know that the original form of motive power would have been clockwork, is that right?
Yes, it was. It was very popular, particularly in the early days of modern railways. I had a clockwork Bassett locomotive when I was a child, and that ran for 2 or 3 minutes on a winding.
Now then, moving on from clockwork, Lionel, to electricity. That came into vogue, didn't it? Very much so, and this is what I'm going to be operating. Now just explain how this little locomotive here works.
Well, this locomotive's got a 5-pole Bueller motor, very smooth running motor.
Yeah.
And it's got pickups. Not only is it picking up current off the wheels, the tyres, it's also picking up current off the 2 slides there.
Okay, well let's run through the pros and cons of this system then. Very popular, but the first thing that springs to my mind is that it's going to need a lot of cabling. Would that be true?
You've got to get the power to the track, quite right. You need cables, you need a central control point, and also you have to keep the track clean and maintained. And with electric locomotives, to get smooth running, you need to clean the rails before each operation.
Hands and knees almost, going around cleaning.
Yes, you can if you want to spend the money, buy a track cleaning maintenance locomotive, which does the job for you.
Right, and presumably you're adding to your problems if you choose to go the overhead catenary route, in that you need to keep that particular wire clean as well.
Yes, although it is self-cleaning.
Right.
But it's vulnerable to animals. You know, we get cats in the garden and around here even foxes, and they could very easily damage the catenary.
And this little fella here is battery powered, isn't it?
Yes, if you don't want to electrically bond your track, then this is an excellent option. There's a rechargeable battery in here, and we can see the motor there, and there is an on-off switch to go forwards or backwards.
Right.
Additionally, you could add radio control to such a locomotive.
Right.
And Brian has a fine example over here. You'll see the Southern 762 Linton and Barnstaple.
Yeah.
That is battery powered but radio controlled.
Well, I heard that going round earlier, and that sounded like a steam locomotive.
Yes, because if you look behind the locomotive, there's a grey van, and that contains a sound unit, and that produces steam sound. You can get whistle sounds as well, and all sorts of additional things.
Presumably, that locomotive next to it doesn't have a sound unit. That's real steam, isn't it?
Yes, you're looking at a live steam locomotive.
Okay, well let's go into that whole area then. So how does that work? What's that powered by?
The steam locomotive has a boiler, and it has a flue running through the boiler. It has a burner which is powered by butane gas, and the hot gas, burning gas, goes through the tube in the boiler and up the chimney. And that heats the water, water boils, produces steam, powers the pistons in the cylinders. You need a period of preparation. You have to fill the boiler with water, and you have to fill the gas tank with gas. It's designed that the gas tank will run out first, so there's no chance of the water running dry in the boiler and thus damaging the locomotive.
Is there such a thing as a coal-powered, like in the real, the prototype, a coal-powered engine?
Ah, well, yes, there is, and Brian's got one. You ought to go and see that.
Well, Brian, when Lionel told me about this model, he had a bit of a glint in his eye, and I think I can see why, because even if this did nothing other than just sit here for the rest of its life, it would still be a beautiful model, wouldn't it?
It is a very, very accurate model of the Vale-of-Rydal locomotive, Welsh narrow gauge railway, and it is actually still running today.
The real one's still running,
Yes.
and this runs as well, doesn't it? Coal-fired. Can we see in the back here?
Yes.
That lifts off, doesn't it?
That lifts off and this comes out.
Yeah. Just take us through the controls here.
Right, well we have all the authentic controls you'd find in a real loco.
Right.
This is the regulator,
Yeah.
which I can just move around like that. Forward and reverse.
Yeah.
The blow-down valve
Yeah.
here. And a whistle valve.
That works,
here.
does it?
That works. Just turn it round.
I mean, that's all wonderful. Does it, you know, when it's obviously running, you know, are you having to chase behind it and control all those?
No, this model is radio controlled.
Really?
And all the radio control equipment is in the side tank in there. And these are operated by trumpet valves,
Cunningly
which is
hidden.
quite unique to this model.
Yeah.
Normally, of course, the cab has all the radio control.
Yeah.
So it frees it up for the manual controls.
Right, so now there's a firebox down there, isn't there? What's the principle here? That you load that up with coal, is that right?
Well, eventually, to start with, because you're starting from cold, you would use paraffin-soaked charcoal,
Yeah.
which you use the shovel to put in the firebox. And if you're very clever, you can open the firebox like that, careful not to shove it in.
Okay.
And you put about 12 shovelfuls in and then light it through the chimney.
Yeah. Do you have to create a draft or something to get
Yes,
that going?
you do.
What, do you blow across it?
You use a mechanical blower,
Oh, right, yeah.
which you put in the chimney
Yeah.
and run on 9 volts.
And that creates a draft to
And-
get the fire glowing.
Yes, you keep that going until you're up to about 40 pounds pressure, and then you can take the blower off and rely on the blower in the locomotive itself.
How long would it take from cold to getting this locomotive up and ready
About
to run?
quarter of an hour, 20 minutes.
Well, it's certainly working well, isn't it, Brian? That is great.
Yeah, she's going really well now.
Yeah. Did it go as fast as that in real life?
I think it was a bit over scale speed, actually.
No, I noticed there's a quite a curious device you've got in your shed over there when you were steaming her up. What's that all about?
Well, that's a means of steaming it up at a high level and then lowering it down to the track level.
Yeah.
It's much easier, particularly with a sophisticated loco like this, to get it steamed up at high level.
Right. So what have you done there? You've constructed this device.
Well,
haven't you?
it's basically a board which is held up by ropes that go around various blocks, and then they finish up at a wheel. So that as I wind the wheel down, so the board lowers to the track level at ground level.
You interested in yachts at all?
Yes, that's my other hobby.
Hence the ropes and pulleys. Very good. Nice chat with Lionel.
Yeah.
And if I were to go my own way, David, I would go, I think probably batteries and radio control. It seems the easiest to me, and I like the idea of not having to maintain the track. However, my hand has been forced by my uncle and forced me down the route of electricity. Now, I have not been helping you with any of the electricity that's been done so far. And it's not because I'm trying to get out of anything, it's because I don't know what I'm talking about or doing. And I think, especially in the garden, you really ought to leave it to the hands of an expert. So how many circuits have you put in outside here?
Got 3.
OK, well, let's start with the obvious one, and that's the one for the track here.
Yeah.
What's that?
Okay. These trains, or most of these trains, will run on 24 volts, 8 amps.
OK, now I'm sorry, just before you get into the swing of it, and this is for people who don't understand, and I'm including myself, volts and amps, just...
Okay. In your house, you've got 230 volts, and your cooker is about 45 amps.
Right, so that's a lot of power.
That's a lot of electricity, a lot of energy, it'll kill you.
Right.
Out here, from 230 volts, we've got 24, about
Right.
a tenth.
Right.
And instead of 45 amps, we've got 8 amps.
How do we get down to that from our...
We've got a thing called a transformer.
Right.
We plug it in the mains, and then out the other end comes 24 volts, 8 amps. The voltage, if you like, is the volume.
Right.
And the amperage is the pressure of the electricity, like water.
But I can touch this quite happily.
Yeah.
Now, how many have you had to go all the way around the circuit attaching cables?
No. The track's joined with little brass plates.
Right.
At every join.
Right.
So that makes electricity go everywhere. And we put the electricity in at one place in the shed.
Now, this is why you were so keen for me to use copper grease in between the joints, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To enable the connections to work.
We've got these things called fish plates, and
Right.
you know why they're called fish plates?
No.
Because the very first railway line
Yeah.
had a fish belly shape.
Right.
So they're called fish plates at the
Okay.
end. So that's all for electrical continuity.
Right.
Yeah.
And if I didn't use copper grease, which is a nice easy way of doing it,
Yeah.
I would have to solder the joints together, wouldn't I?
And that's not easy in the open air.
Right. Second circuit, what's that for?
The second one is for all of your accessories, your signals that work automatically, your points that you control. We put 18 volts and AC.
Why do we
Here's a
have
wire.
DC on the track and AC for the points?
It's easier to use AC, which goes both ways,
Right.
to make points go both ways.
Right. Or signals up and down.
Or signals up and down. It's just easier.
And the third circuit?
The third circuit is 12 volts.
Right.
It's for the lighting. And that's
Ah.
what these wires are that have been sticking out the concrete.
Okay, I've been wondering about those.
We've used a car battery charger because it's 12 volts.
So that's acting as a transformer.
Yeah, same as the other one. It's giving us 12 volts DC.
Right.
Your car light bulbs run on 12 volts DC.
Right.
So we're going to put car light bulbs in the buildings,
Yeah.
run by the car battery charger.
And we've got a bilge pump, haven't we?
Yeah. And the bilge pump in your pond is 12 volts from a
Yeah.
boat.
Right.
So we're feeding that as well as the lights.
And have we included a circuit breaker on that particular circuit?
Yeah, because it's water and electricity and it doesn't matter how safe it is, belt and braces make it utterly safe.
But don't forget, if you don't know what you're doing, get an expert in. See you in part 2. Now, this little bit of track on the railway here has given us cause for thought. It's only about 1.5 feet long, but this is our dockside railway. And I quite like this to be a tramway. Purely cosmetic, but you might want to employ a similar technique for your own railway. If, for instance, you're running at ground level and you want your track to cross either a path or a driveway. Now, you can buy these plastic inserts like so, and they simply clip between the track like that. They have an etch pattern on them to resemble paving stones. However, that is a little bit too easy for us, so I've devised a system of my own. And as usual, I'm not very sure whether it's going to work or not. What I've done, however, is taken some pieces from the worktop that I installed into the shed. This is the veneer from the front of it. Very thin pieces, and I've been sticking them to the inside of my brass track using that sticky stuff that one uses to put posters up in student bedrooms with. You know the stuff that I mean. And that hopefully is going to give me my gap for the wheels to run through. I'm now simply going to fill the rest of this channel with mortar. Fingers crossed, because once this is done, there's no going back really. And I hope that this works. There we go. And the trick here is going to be getting this all level. Just roughly getting this into place at the moment before I smooth it all off. We were thinking of using rapid drying cement for this, but discovered that it kept setting off before it got anywhere close to this stage. So we've ended up using just ordinary mortar. As you can see, in order to do this, I've had to drain the water feature. In fact, I didn't have to drain the water feature, but Freddie, my 2-year-old son, drained it for me. It actually lasted a lot longer than we thought before he threw a very sharp object into it and punctured the liner. What that does give us is an opportunity to show you how to repair punctures. Cast your mind back, if you will, to the programme that we did about bridges. Remember the mad old bridgeman of Hampshire, Richard Ince? Well, he's joined us again. And with good reason, because Richard here has yet another form of motive power, and it's one that I haven't even heard of before. Richard, what sort of engine is this?
It's a hot air engine, and the power is supplied by this little gas burner, which fits in to the engine, and it heats the air in these two cylinders. Now, when that air is heated, the action of the expanded air pushes the piston back, which starts the driving process. At the same time, these two cylinders push cold air into the front of these. And that action is then repeated, and it keeps happening very, very quickly.
And presumably a very efficient form of power.
And it's quite an efficient...
Does this thing work?
It works beautifully. Would you like to see it go?
Let's see it work.
Well, then I've got to fire it up.
Do that.
And with a little bit of pushing to start it off with, a little more gas, and in a moment, in a few minutes, it will start going round.
Well, it's going at a full old rate of knots there, isn't it, Rich?
Yes, I think the time has come to put a carriage onto the...
Just to sort of restrain it a little bit.
Back, and the only way to do that is to hold it up and bring on one of the wagons and couple it up, and...
It's a nice old wagon, that.
Yes.
Now, this hot air engine, all very well in a model, you know, is there any prototype for that? Is it used in a full-scale machine?
It's been used on boats. It's been used, I believe, on a Swedish submarine where you've got the heat of the submarine inside and the cold sea air, the cold sea water outside.
Presumably very useful for a submarine. And it's quite quiet, isn't it?
It's quite quiet.
Well, what a marvellous little machine, and that's hot air. No, I'm not going to make that joke, actually. Well, David, you seem to be establishing yourself in my shed here, I'd like to say. What's going on now?
Well, I'm putting lights into one of your wagons.
Oh, right. Easy job or hard?
Easy.
Right.
For a change.
Yeah.
All the wagons have the same roof. It's a pretty standard roof.
Yeah.
And the roofs all have these two little spigots.
Yeah.
And you can get a lighting kit that screws onto those two little posts.
Yes.
Just like that, yeah?
Yeah.
2 wires with sockets, 2 wires with plugs that go to the next carriage.
Right.
Yeah? And so your whole train can light up.
Oh, right. Well, can you get coloured ones?
Yeah.
Because I was sort of thinking, you know, if you had a nice red one of these, yeah, you could put that in the firebox of a loco or something like that.
Of course you could.
All right, what if you haven't got this particular system?
Yeah, if you haven't got those little things in the roofs and so on, what I do is I get these, which are festoon bulbs for motor cars.
Right, they're the courtesy light when you open the door, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can easily solder a piece of wire on each end.
Yeah.
Yeah? And that runs on 12 volts because your car's 12 volts.
Right.
Glue it in place there.
Yeah.
Join your wires on as before.
Now, will that grow brighter and or go dimmer, you know, on the...
It would
dependent
normally.
on the speed of your train?
Yeah, that's what's clever about this. The bulb stays the same brightness.
Right.
That's what's clever. There's a little bit of electronics in there that keeps it the same brightness. But your railway has got the same voltage all the way around the track.
Right.
So the lights will always stay the same brightness anyway.
Right, okay. Now, those bulbs look quite handy size to me. Are they the sort of thing that I could put inside my buildings, should I choose to go down that path?
They're useful for all sorts of things. The other thing you can do is you can make what really are floodlights, I suppose, like you'd find in a marshalling yard in a railway station.
Or a harbour.
Or a harbour.
On a little creek.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is just a piece of brass tube.
Yeah.
Bit of wire.
Yeah.
Things at the top. Bulb this way, bulb that way.
Yeah.
And that's 2 little floodlights. We've got to put little reflectors on the top to make them look smart.
Yeah.
Paint them green, and then they stand up along your harbour.
Yeah, terrific. The future's bright. The future's a light bulb.
I'm Don Neal. The railway is the Kirtley branch of the LMS. It is O gauge. We run on 24 volts but with 12 volt motors. A lot of it's scratch built, but it has been built or even collected over the years. This particular railway started 44 years ago and has more or less developed since that time, although we were vandalised at one time and had to start again almost from scratch. Circuit in the Garden is about 250 to 300 feet. The viaduct was cast in concrete, again, it saw life in 1961 and is now suffering a bit from overexposure. Before we were married, we decided, okay, we're going to have a model railway in the garden, but I don't want posts, I don't want brick piers or anything like that. I just want it to be integrated into the garden. So between us we have managed to do that, I think. We imported 10.5 tonnes of granite from Caribbean Leicestershire and built the rockery. It was very rough at the time, and gradually clad it with various plant life. We have managed to find a lot of reasonably small growing shrubs and trees that to us give the impression of countryside, and that is my scenery. Joan is the principal gardener, of course. I just do what I'm told.
And so to the end of another show we come, and rather bizarrely, in a programme all about power, we finish illuminated by nothing much more than this 5-watt bulb in the front of this locomotive. Still, it looked good going around the garden at night, wouldn't it? See you next time. Ta-ra!